Welcome. This is the first video that I will be making for the Flip Your Classroom, so please bear with me. Today you'll be learning about the Ottoman Empire. On my teacher website you can find more information on Unit 4 Section 2. This is meritsocialstudies.weebly.com. You can use the Global 1 Ottoman Empire guided note sheets from that site to take notes or take your own notes. You can also find out more information about the Ottomans at www.theottomans.org. So we will be looking at the Ottoman expansion, and the reason why this is important is because it gives rise to Europe's age of exploration. It does so because their expansion forces Europe to look for new trade routes. We also see that the Ottoman Empire has one of the largest and longest lasting empires in the world. So some of the objectives that we'll be looking at, we'll be looking at the extent of the Muslim empire at the height of their power. We'll also look at how ethnic and religious composition of the Ottoman Empire reflects their political and societal organization. And we'll look at Islam as an influence in political, economic, military, and diplomatic interactions within the Ottoman Empire and outside of their realm. So just an overview of what you'll be looking at. We'll be looking at how to read a map. These maps can be found on my website at Unit 4, Section 2, so you can see larger examples. Please keep in mind when we talk about Istanbul, we are talking about the former city of Constantinople. Constantinople will become Istanbul under the Ottoman Empire. Suleiman the Magnificent is probably one of the most important Ottoman sultans. Sultan is an Ottoman term for ruler, and Suleiman will give rise to the Ottoman Golden Age. And if you remember from previous units, social hierarchy will refer to class structure within a society. So we'll first begin looking at expansion. During the 1400s, the Byzantine Empire had been in decline for nearly 2 centuries. That's 200 years. It was threatened by a nomadic Turkish-speaking group that had migrated from Central Asia into Asia Minor. In 1453, the Ottoman armies surround the Byzantine capital of Constantinople. During the 2-month siege, Ottoman cannons pounded Constantinople's defensive walls, allowing the attackers to break through and finally capture the city. The Ottomans then renamed Constantinople Istanbul. Whereas the religion of Constantinople was Christianity, the Ottomans practiced Islam, and so the Istanbul city becomes dominantly Islamic. During the geographic expansion, we see that the Ottoman Empire was able to use their well-armed forces and effective military strategies to very quickly spread their empire. So if you look at this map here, I'll load up here. Again, you can find a larger map on my website on Unit 4, Section 2. What we can see is that over time, the Ottoman Empire quickly expands. It comes from Central Asia into Asia Minor. It expands into Eastern Europe. We also see that it goes down into the Crimean Peninsula and across northern Africa. So in 1453, we see that the Ottoman Empire is now south of Mecca. It has entered into the Nile River Valley in Egypt and even into parts of what would be today Russia. By the 1500s, the Ottomans had built one of the largest, most powerful empires in the Middle East and Europe. We see the empire reach 3 continents: the Middle East, southwestern Europe, and North Africa. Their success is greatly due to the fact that they used cannons and foot soldiers with muskets. They also in addition, the expansion of the Ottoman Empire will then force the Europeans to look for new trade routes. The Ottoman expansion completely disrupts European trade routes. This ultimately leads to the European age of exploration. I like to tell my students that it's kind of like a Foot Locker versus an outlet shop. If you want a pair of sneakers, you can go to Foot Locker, but you're going to pay more money. If you go directly to an outlet shop, you'll save quite a bit of money on those sneakers. So by going through the Ottoman Empire to trade, you're using a middleman. On top of that, it's disrupted. The trade might not necessarily be as regular as it previously was. So if you can find new ways to bypass the Ottoman Empire and get directly to Asia to trade, you could save yourself a lot of money. And this is what we will see happen, especially beginning with the Portuguese. Moving on, trying to find new trade routes so that they can then have a reliable trade route, removing that middleman, and making the fortunes for themselves. We see a number of achievements of the Ottomans, especially during their golden age. We see that there are Greco-Roman and Middle Eastern influences in their empire. The Byzantine heritage can also be found in government, social life, and architecture within the Ottoman Empire. Suleiman, the Magnificent, is able to reign in an era of peace and prosperity known as a golden age. This is a picture here of Suleiman. People going ahead and paying respect to him. Suleiman is known as the Magnificent, the Lawgiver. He is a sultan, or the ruler of the Ottoman Empire. He is very young when he comes to power, but very quickly shows his military effectiveness and modernizes the Ottoman military. He continues to add new territories to his empire, and his rule ultimately will become considered the golden age of the Ottoman Empire. Westerners were awed by him, calling him the Magnificent, but his people called him the Lawgiver, as he improved the justice system throughout his empire. He creates a very vast and diverse society. Islam is the dominant force within this empire, but many faiths will coexist under Ottoman rule. So we see the Ottomans are ruling over a very vast area with a very diverse population. So while Islam is a dominant force, they successfully rule many people for hundreds of years by accepting other faiths. Within the society, we see a social hierarchy. We see men of the pen, the sword, men of negotiation, and men of husbandry. Men of the pen are at the very top of the social structure. They're highly educated, such as scientists, lawyers, judges, and poets. The men of the swords are military members who are also very high in the social hierarchy. We see the men of negotiation are just below the elite. These men are businessmen such as money changers, tax collectors, and artisans. The men of husbandry are farmers and herders. While the top two classes here are pretty much entirely Muslim, the bottom two classes could be people from all backgrounds, including Muslim. The class structure helps reinforce Islam as a dominant force in the Ottoman Empire, since the top two are going to be comprised of predominantly Muslim individuals. Ottoman leaders recruited military and government officers from the conquered peoples. Some Christian families were even required to turn their sons over to the government. They were converted to Islam, and the best soldiers became Janissaries, an elite force in the Ottoman army. They are very elite. They had to live by very strict rules, but they did have high living standards. The Janissaries are legendary, and if any of you have seen the new movie, Dracula Untold, Dracula actually starts out as a Janissary. He becomes a legend in this movie because of his military ability, and he ultimately retires to return home until the Ottomans then show up, demanding his own son be turned over to join the Janissaries and be trained for their military. Once again, during the Golden Age, we see an increase in arts and literature. Painters are going to use Persian styles to create detailed miniatures and illuminated manuscripts. Ottoman writers also use Persian and Arab models to create Turkish works. Ultimately, we'll see a decline of the Ottoman Empire, much like other areas, because of government corruption, poor leadership, and generally nations start to break away from Ottoman control. The empire did survive into the 20th century, but we see the decline start much earlier. Again, the government corruption and poor leadership really starts to take its toll, and as this takes its toll, nations will push for their independence. Ultimately, European advances will help Europe expand their power beyond the Ottomans. The rise in power of European nations is the major external reason for their decline. The European commercial technology and their military technology has surpassed the Ottomans by the 1700s. Ultimately, the commercial revolution helps contribute to this decline. The industrially based economies of Europe completely surpass the agriculturally based Ottoman society. The commercial revolution in Europe aids in the decline of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans just cannot keep up with Europe as they advance both commercially and industrially. Following World War I, we see that the Ottoman Empire has completely collapsed and ceased to exist. Again, if you would like to find more information on the Ottomans, you can go to www.theottomans.org, or you can see Unit 4, Section 2 on my teacher website at meritsocialstudies.weebly.com.